I'm Vance Bastian here with my co-host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge Season 9, Episode 11 interview. We'll be talking with Gary Pedler and specifically following the projection of his book Gaydonia from inception to where it is today. So if you haven't seen the first interview, let's get to know our guest. Gary Pedler was raised in the Napa Valley when it produced as many plums as grapes, studied at UC Santa Cruz when it was still small and kooky, and made his home in San Francisco before it was annexed by Silicon Valley. Gary's published credits include the middle grade novel Amy McDougall, Master Matchmaker, which we talked about last time. Check out his interview right here. The comic novella Gaydonia, and the travel memoir Couchsurfing the Musical. His shorter works have appeared in the Missouri Review, Berkeley Fiction Review, the Smart Set, the anthology Outer Voices, Inner Lives, and other publications. Gary is currently single and has no children, though he did once have a cat he was very fond of and still dreams about with intense feeling. Gary, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
We're glad you made it back. So I know that Gaydonia has gone through several evolutions at this point. I'm going to back up a bit for folks who haven't heard the first interview. And what was the spark for writing this? What was the impetus? Where was the muse talking to you?
Well, the beginning of that story is I retired at 50. And once I retired, I wanted to go on some big, long trips. So my first trip was to Eastern Europe and to the Balkans. And as I was making that trip, I would arrive in a town and go to the tourist information office, and I could tell that the tourist Department of Tourism had put its head together to say, how do we sell our town? How do we package it? What's the gimmick? So, we make a lot of sandals here, so we'll say we're the sandal making capital of the Balkans, something like that, in various variations. So after I came back home from the trip, I went to the gym one day and my mind wandered, as it tends to do at the gym because it's kind of boring. And I thought, well, so what if we had a town or a country that decided that its gimmick would be that it's a gay mecca and that gay tourists should come here and spend their pink pounds and pink dollars, and the money will pour in. So I didn't think that much of the idea. So I went home and talked to my roommate, Maria, who was also a writer, and just to make conversation, I told her, here's a funny idea for a story that I will not write. And she listened to it and said, well, actually, I think maybe you should write it. It's a good concept. So I listened to her and turned it over in my mind and did. Yeah, I was in the mood to give it a try. It wasn't the sort of writing I thought that I did. I thought I write adult fiction that's realistic and kind of autobiographical, but I was in a mood to try something different. And I saw it originally as a screenplay because I think this happens to a lot of us writers. We think, oh, I'll write a screenplay and it'll be made into a film, and that will be really exciting and wonderful and different than sitting and writing my novel and following that path. So I figured out how to write a screenplay and started to do that. I was not completely naive. So I also, parallel to the screenplay version, I was writing a stage play version.
Didn't it start? Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't it start as a comic though? And
as a comic book? No.
I thought it started illustrated. I'm sorry.
No, it'd be fun. I would love to have it illustrated, but
Gotcha.
No, it started as a screenplay, and parallel to that was a stage play. I think no one will be surprised to learn that the screenplay, nothing happened with that. I sent it out to wherever I found to send out a screenplay to. And what I mainly remember was that I heard absolutely nothing. It was though I dropped a pebble into the well and was listening, and there was just absolutely nothing. There was no, thank you for sending this to us, but we think it's crap. Or there was absolutely nothing. On the other hand, with the stage play version, I was spending the summer in Edinburgh doing more traveling. and in Edinburgh was a small theater, gay theater, amateur gay theater company. And they had a contest while I was there for a play that the winning play they would stage. So I thought, oh, I'll enter Gaydonia in the contest. And I did. I did not win the contest. And there were only 3 entries, and yet I did not win the contest. So another play won. There was a dispute between the company and the author, and they threw out that play and they went to, I guess, their second choice, which was my play, and they did stage it. So for all of 3 performances, and in a church that had been converted into a community center. And so I did have the satisfaction of seeing it staged. I was very tickled to have actors on stage saying the lines, moving around, doing what I told them to do in the stage direction.
Mm-hmm.
About half the cast was pretty good, and half the cast was pretty bad, but it was still fun. I thought, okay, so I launch other productions of it from that. That didn't happen. And then came the 3rd iteration of Gaydonia, which is one we're dealing with now, which is the novella. So I thought, okay, well, I'll write it in a way that I'm more familiar with, which is not a screenplay, not a stage play, but I'll do it as a piece of fiction. And so now it seems that that was always what it was meant to be, was a short novel. And
Nice.
yeah, that's the end of that story.
So if I were standing at like a book fair or in a bookstore holding it, what would be the elevator pitch?
Oh, the elevator pitch would be a small, poor, imaginary country in the Balkans decides to make money by turning itself into a gay tourist mecca. I think that's all I can fit into one sentence without making it a long run-on sentence. So that's the premise, is that the main character is a straight guy, Davor, and he is a minister in the Ministry of Finance for the country of Slovakia. And so the country desperately needs money. They've got to pay their World Bank loans. And so he comes up with this idea for transforming Slovakia into Gaydonia.
So is it pitched as a comedy? Does wackiness ensue?
Yeah, it's a kind of wacky comedy because in real life probably none of this is going to happen. A country is not going to turn itself in. They're not going to advertise themselves as a gay country to attract gay tourists. So yeah, it's hopefully, yeah, a funny fantasy novel. Once I started working on it, in the back of my mind was The Mouse That Roared, the book and movie from the 50s. Yeah, you're nodding. In which there's a small imaginary country, Grand Fenwick, located between France and Switzerland, teensy tiny country, and it decides that it's poor too, and so it's going to have the U.S. declare war on it, and they'll lose the war, and then the U.S. will send them all this Marshall Plan money, and that's how the money will generate. So it's a farce.
Didn't Key West almost do a real life version of that?
I don't know the later history of the Mouse That Roared. After I wrote Gaydonia, I did go back and read the book because I'd never read the book. I was curious. I didn't want to read it while I was writing my Gaydonia because I didn't want to feel, oh, it's already been done. Why am I doing it? I will say a movie was made of that. And so who am I to have any criticism of it? But compared to my book is only 22,000 words. And so the book version of Mouse That Roared seemed to me slow. So the movie, it actually, I think, worked to transfer it into a movie because the movie brisked it up. And yeah, so we didn't really need a whole book to cover the story of the Mouse That Roared.
Nice.
I just had a visual that when you first talked about it, and being a gay mecca kind of thing, I just kind of flashed to Who Framed Rabbit when they go into Toontown the first time, and it's all colorful,
Right.
vivacious.
There's a scene where, so there's all these, ridiculous things they do to, well, how do you make a country gay and sell it to people and have publicity about it? They obviously put up gay flags everywhere, and postage stamps become rainbow flags, et cetera, et cetera. So I had fun with just thinking, well, we just let my imagination run amok and say, how do we do this? The pony ride in the park becomes the Brokeback Mountain experience. So everything gets gayed.
Right. It's the theater of the absurd.
Love
But at
it.
the same time, it's a comedy, but I did want to touch on some. I tried to do it as a comedy that was taking itself very seriously. So the characters don't know it's a comedy. They think it's
Right.
really important what they're
It's a
doing, and they're
poignant
saving
comedy, right?
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily say poignant, but there are elements of there's a little bit of reflection on
Gotcha.
tourism and what it does to a place. The other thing I was aware of as I was on that trip that I was describing was how some cities in particular had just given themselves over to tourism completely. Prague, Dubrovnik, and how it had spoiled them. They're beautiful places, but if you take all the community out of it and the life out of it, just give it over to tourists, you're gonna have a dead city. Especially Dubrovnik felt that way to me.
Yeah.
There's a little cautionary note because they get what they wished for. The money comes in, the gay tourists come, but is it their old country that they knew and loved? No.
Right. All right. Anything about the novel I didn't think to ask that you would like readers to know?
Well, yeah. Well, a recent development with the novel. The novel came out a while back, but a French friend of mine said, "Oh, I read the novel and I want to do a French translation of it."
Nice.
So I gave a thumbs up to that, thinking, "Yeah, you go off and do the French translation. Bring it to me. I'll bring it to the publisher." Like a lot of writing projects, it ended up being more involved than that for me. But so I was reading the English version again and again, and the French version again and again in its drafts. But a benefit of that was that the book really held up well for me. It continued to seem, I felt, yeah, good choice, well constructed. And the most gratifying thing was to find that it was still funny. That the funny bits, I would still think, I have read this. I wrote it and I read it a million times, but this part is still breaking me up. So it was a nice, and then to experience it in a different language that I was kind of partially collaborating with my French friend.
That's
So
awesome.
that actually it's in the publisher's hands and should actually be out pretty soon, a French translation.
Nice. All right. Are you ready for our get to know you questions?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Take it away, Baz.
I'm gentle. All right. In this year of diving deeper, what's your favorite writing snack or drink?
My writing zone, which is where we are, this is my little office, is no smoking, no drinking, no fooling around, serious, get down to the writing business space. So I have my big mason jar of water that I drink from occasionally. And I'm not one of those writers who wants to go to the coffee shop and have other people around me. No, no, no. I want my very quiet space. If there's noise coming from outside that is bothering me, I'll turn on my white noise machine. So it's pretty puritanical and severe, but it works for me.
All right. Well, water's good. That's a good one. Yeah. There you go. All right. What books did you read growing up?
Growing up, one thing that happened was, for me, there was at about 13 or 14, there was a pretty clear division between reading children's books and reading adult books. And I grew up in Napa, and so Napa had two different buildings in different parts of town. One was the children's library, and one was the adult. So you really made a very clear choice of which building you were going to. And so I waved goodbye to the children's library and would go to the adult library. And I wanted to read pretty quickly. I wanted to read the big serious classic books, War and Peace and Portrait of a Lady and To the Lighthouse and Song of Lovers and The Magic Mountain. And so that's what I focused on. There wasn't so there wasn't really too much of a transition, a very long transition between the children's and the adults. And I'm glad that I read those books as a teenager because I just gobbled them down. And I would just completely enter into the world that the author had created, which was often a different country, a different time period. So they weren't assigned reading. I wasn't reading them for a class. I wasn't analyzing them. I was just immersing myself in them. And I'm glad I read a lot of those books then, because I don't know how, I don't know if I would read them now and would the experience be different. I remember that, I don't know, 10 years ago, I tried to read Moby Dick because I thought, oh, here's a classic that I didn't read as a kid. I just couldn't, it seemed too slow, too distant. So probably if I read it as a kid, it would have been a different experience.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, who has been the biggest supporter of your writing?
I would have to say my parents, actually. I dropped out of college after 2 years, and I told my parents, I want to be a writer. And so why do I need a BA in English Lit? How is that going to help me? And so my father came up with a plan that he would send me to secretarial school as a way to get me into a job where I can make money. And then in the meantime, for 2 years, to make up for the 2 years of college that I was missing, they would pay my rent. So I moved to San Francisco, got a little studio, and they paid my rent. And so I was going to write. That was what my focus was going to be. And I wrote a novel, and it wasn't good. It was kind of mediocre. So in retrospect, it wasn't a good plan. They should have, or I should have gone back to school and gotten the BA, maybe not in English literature, but in something. But I do remember it as a very loving thing that my parents did for me to say, how do we help you become the person you want to be? Okay, you want to be a writer, so here's what we're going to do for you. So no one has equaled that. No one has said, I'm going to pay your rent for 2 years. I write a novel. So.
That is the best advance story I have ever heard.
It is sweet. They were great.
That's great. All right. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
This is an easy question to answer. I am a morning person. Morning. My problem with being a morning person is that I'm such a morning person that I try to cram as much stuff into the morning as possible because it's my good time to do everything. So I exercise in the morning. I do my business stuff in the morning. I start writing in the morning. So the challenge is how to at least start all those things in the morning, because later in the day I will not / cannot do business stuff, my taxes or something like that. So
all right.
How much I can get done is always a challenge.
Okay. Well, what's your favorite hobby outside of writing?
One thing I really like to do is go on long distance walks. So I've done quite a few of them. So that would be, I stay somewhere, I walk 50 miles, I stay in the next town or hotel, and then I walk another. So spread out over 5, 6, 7 days.
Huh.
As opposed to, I've done traveling where it's more like, to take an extreme example, there's a viewpoint, you drive to the viewpoint, you get out, you look, you take pictures, you get back in your car, the bus, and go on. Well, I realize that doesn't make much of an impression on me. Whereas if I'm doing a slow walk through a landscape or a place or along a trail, it really has time to sink in. I'm out in that place all day long, from really almost sun up to sundown. So looking back, those are the travel things that I remember most. One, for example, walking to Mont Saint Michel and then spending about 2 days walking away from Mont Saint Michel along the bay and seeing it first get bigger and bigger, seeing it get smaller and smaller. So those are my most vivid memories.
All right. Well, has writing and publishing a book changed the way you see yourself?
A little bit, because I could go from, if I'm talking to someone about being a writer, it used to be, I'm a writer, but I haven't published anything. That sounds a little weak. So now I can say I'm a writer and I've published several books. And the next step, I think, would be to climb a little farther up the ladder and say I'm a writer and I've been published by Random House and reviewed in the New York Times. So I haven't gotten there yet. That would be another stage.
Good
All
to have
right.
goals, though.
Yep. All right. If you wrote a spin-off about one of your characters, which would it be?
I think it's more likely I would do a sequel. So last time I had an interview with you guys in last year. I was talking about my middle grade novel, Amy McDougall, Master Matchmaker.
Mm-hmm.
So that was originally, it was a different book. It really had two halves. There was a half that took place in San Francisco. There was a half that took place in Puerto Rico. So my agent said, you really have two books here. So I removed the Puerto Rico part, kept the San Francisco part, changed it around. So there is a more adventures of Amy, who's the main character, that take place in Puerto Rico. So sometime maybe I'll pick that up again and turn that into the sequel.
Nice.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Have you ever traveled as research for your book?
It's been more the other way around, where travel has, as with the Gaydonia story, has given rise to the book. I did a lot of traveling, and so what emerged from that was a series of short stories that I wrote that were set in the different places that I visited or lived in. And in one instance, the idea preceded the place. So I had an idea for a story set in India in the supposed utopian community of Oroville, which I haven't visited, but I've heard about. So I'd probably have gone to India anyway, but I made a point of going to Oroville, and I did write the story. So it did work. My vision of how the story could play out in that place held together. So, but that was an instance where I traveled somewhere a little bit to write the story.
Nice.
All right. And finally, how do you celebrate when you finish your book?
Oh, I have to admit, I don't know if other people give this answer, but I don't really feel too celebratory. I feel more a little sad, I finished the project. Now what next? There's a bit of a letdown. And also the project then has taken its final form for the moment, and there's no fudging, well, I'll come back and change this and fix it and improve that. It is what it is at that point. And also that's probably the point at which it's going to go out into the world and other people are going to read it and possibly criticize it and say something like, you actually have two books here and you need to cut it in half and all that. So I've learned from experience that I'm usually not going to be upbeat at the end of the project.
Okay,
Makes
well, you made
sense.
it through the list. Bravo.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That wasn't too bad.
Yeah. So what's coming up next for you?
I know about the experience of finishing a project because I just finished a project, the one that we talked about last time, which is me putting together my diaries from my high school years into Diary of a Teenage Homosexual, 1971 to 1974. So I think in that interview 9 months ago, I said, I'm almost finished. And then I wasn't almost finished. And so now I'm almost finished or finished. So so the upcoming will be whatever follows after finishing the project and trying to get it out there. I'm waiting to hear, I have the freelance editor looking at some of it. So we'll see what he says.
Nice. Are you going to look for a publishing house after that?
Of course.
Nice. All right. Keep us updated.
I would be happy to.
Where is the best place for people to follow you for those updates or any other updates you might have?
The easiest starting point is to go to my website, which is my name, conveniently, garypedler.com. And there's links to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram there.
Perfect.
Resources.
Perfect. All right. Do you have any final words of wisdom?
I think no. I think not. I think if there were any words of wisdom, they were already scattered through the interview.
Perfect. All right, folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Gary Pedler for joining us. Gary, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure, too. We at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. So if you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. This show was produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.